Marcus sat alone at a small table in the Rusty Anchor bar. It was Friday night and the place was full of people having fun. Marcus kept quiet, drinking his beer slowly and looking at messages from his old Navy SEAL friends. After 15 years as a Navy SEAL and fighting in 3 wars, normal life felt strange to him. He moved to this small town just 3 weeks ago to find some peace. The young man serving drinks had been nice when Marcus came in, but the bar owner, Frank, kept looking at Marcus with angry eyes since he walked in. Frank was a big man with rough skin who always told people he ran the best bar in town. When Marcus got up to buy another drink, Frank quickly stepped in front of him to stop him. "I think you've had enough," Frank said in a loud voice that made people stop talking. "We don't want any problems here." Marcus looked surprised. "Sir, I only had 1 beer. I'm not causing any trouble." Frank crossed his arms. "Look, I don't know you and I need to keep my business safe. Some of my regular customers don't feel comfortable." Marcus looked around. No one was looking at him except the people watching them argue. "I'm just having a quiet drink. I'm a veteran." "Yeah, sure," Frank laughed. "I've heard that before. I'm not asking again. This is my bar and I decide who stays." Some people in the bar looked uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Marcus, who never liked to fight, just nodded. "Okay, I understand." He put a $20 bill on the table, which was more than enough for his 1 beer, and walked to the door. As he was about to leave, Frank shouted, "And don't come back. We like to keep this place a certain way, if you know what I mean." It was clear Frank didn't want him there because he was black. Marcus walked outside into the cool night air, feeling sad and hurt. This wasn't the first time someone treated him badly because of his skin color, but it still hurt every time. That night, Marcus called his old teammate and best friend, James. They had served together for more than 10 years, saving each other's lives many times. When Marcus told James what happened at the Rusty Anchor, James was quiet for a moment. "That's not right, brother," James finally said. "Not after all you've done for this country." "It's okay," Marcus said, but they both knew it wasn't. "I'll go somewhere else." "You know what? I'm actually only 2 hours away visiting my sister," James said. "And I know some of our old team is nearby too. We were planning to meet anyway." "James, don't. Just trust me," James cut him off. "We'll fix this the right way." After they hung up, James made many phone calls. By midnight, he had called 8 former members of their SEAL team who lived close enough to drive there. Some were still in the Navy, others had civilian jobs like Marcus. All of them agreed right away. They would meet at the Rusty Anchor, the DO, next evening. Saturday night at the Rusty Anchor was even busier than Friday. Frank walked between tables talking to his regular customers and watching new people. Business was good, and he was happy until the front door opened at 8 p.m. sharp. James walked in first, standing tall like a soldier. Behind him came 7 other men of different races, all walking the same way with watchful eyes. They moved together, taking 3 tables in the middle of the bar. Frank noticed them right away and frowned, feeling that something was different about this group. When the bartender came to them, James ordered drinks for everyone. "And we're waiting for one more," he added. 10 minutes later, the door opened again, and Marcus walked in. The bar got quieter as he walked to his old teammates, who all stood up to hug him and pat his back. Marcus looked surprised to see so many of them had come. Frank's face got dark with anger. He walked over to their tables. "You," he pointed at Marcus. "I told you not to come back." James stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" "This is not your business," Frank said. "I asked this man to leave yesterday, and I'm asking again." "Actually," James said calmly, "it is our business, all of us." He waved his hand at the group around him. "The man you kicked out yesterday is Commander Marcus, a decorated Navy SEAL with 15 years of service, 3 bronze stars, 2 purple hearts. He saved more American lives than you've served drinks." Frank's face changed a little, but he didn't back down. "I don't care who he is. This is my bar." Another SEAL, a tall man named Rodriguez, spoke up. "We understand that, but we want to know exactly why you asked our brother to leave." I don't have to explain myself, Frank said, though he was clearly losing confidence as he looked at the group of men around him. Let me guess, said another teammate named Wilson. You made judgments based on how he looks? Because the Marcus we know is one of the best men to ever wear the uniform. By now, everyone in the bar was watching what was happening. Among the customers was an old man sitting alone at the bar. He stood up slowly, wearing a Navy veteran hat. Frank, the old man called out, I've been coming here for 20 years. If this is how you treat our Navy SEALs, then maybe I should spend my money somewhere else. Several other people in the bar agreed with him. Frank looked around, suddenly seeing that he was losing control of the situation. James put a hand on Frank's shoulder. We didn't come here to make trouble. We came to have drinks with our brother and to remind people what he and others like him give up for this country. Every day, men and women like Marcus risk their lives so places like this can exist. They don't ask for much back, just some respect. Frank looked at Marcus, then at the group of SEALs, and finally at his customers, many of whom were now looking at him with disapproval. I might have made a mistake, Frank finally admitted, speaking more softly. We all make mistakes, Marcus said, speaking for the first time. What matters is how we fix them. Frank waited a moment, then held out his hand to Marcus. I'm sorry. Really, you're welcome here anytime. Marcus shook his hand. Thank you. The night changed completely after that. The SEALs shared stories from their time in the Navy, the parts they were allowed to talk about anyway. Local people bought them rounds of drinks. Frank, wanting to make things right, announced that all veterans would get their first drink, free from now on. As the night was ending, Marcus found himself sitting at the bar next to Frank. I want you to know something, Marcus said quietly. These guys didn't come here to scare you. They came because that's what we do. We look out for each other. Always have, always will. Frank nodded, truly sorry for what he did. I learned something important today. Sometimes we don't see people for who they really are. That's right, Marcus agreed. But it's never too late to start. Before leaving, James suggested something to Frank. A wall of honor for local veterans. Frank loved the idea. 3 weeks later, when they put up the wall, Marcus's photo was the first one on it, next to a sorry note from Frank that had been framed and signed. The story of what happened at the Rusty Anchor spread throughout the town and beyond. What started as an act of racism ended as a lesson in brotherhood, respect, and the power of standing together. For Marcus, it showed what he already knew, that the bonds made in service never really break. And for Frank, it was a powerful reminder not to judge people before knowing their story. The Rusty Anchor became known not just as the best bar in town, but as a place where everyone, no matter what they looked like, could feel welcome. And every year on Veterans Day, the bar hosted a special event, with Marcus and his SEAL brothers always coming as special guests. 1 month after the big night at the Rusty Anchor, things had changed a lot. Frank's bar now had a wall of honor with pictures of local veterans. Marcus's photo was in the center, and people often stopped to look at it. The story of what happened that night had spread all over town. Some people said the whole SEAL team had forced Frank to close the bar. Others said there was a big fight. But the truth was much simpler and more powerful. Marcus now came to the bar once a week. At first, he felt strange walking in. He remembered how Frank had kicked him out. But Frank always greeted him with respect now. He even saved Marcus's favorite seat at the end of the bar. They weren't exactly friends, but they had found a way to respect each other. The usual? Frank asked one Friday night as Marcus sat down. Yes, please, Marcus said with a small smile. Frank put a cold beer in front of him. On the house. Marcus shook his head. You don't have to do that every time. I want to, Frank said. He looked at the wall of honor. It reminds me to be better. As they talked, the door opened and a young black man in a Navy uniform walked in. He looked nervous, his eyes moving around the room quickly. When he saw Marcus, surprise showed on his face. Commander Marcus? The young man asked, walking over. Marcus turned and studied the young man. Do I know you? No, sir. I'm Petty Officer Thomas Brown. I just finished Bud S training last month. Bud S was the hard training all Navy SEALs had to pass. The guys in my unit told me about what happened here. I didn't believe it at first. Marcus smiled. Which part didn't you believe? That a whole SEAL team showed up to stand with you, Thomas said. And that the bar owner actually apologized. Frank, who was listening, stepped forward. That part is true. I made a mistake. A big one. He held out his hand to Thomas. I'm Frank. First drink from military is free. Thomas looked surprised but shook Frank's hand. Thank you, sir. Marcus patted the seat next to him. Join me. Tell me about Bud S. Was it still as hard as when I went through? For the next hour, Marcus and Thomas talked about Navy SEAL training. Thomas told stories about the cold ocean swims and running for miles in wet clothes. Marcus laughed and shared his own memories from years ago. Frank listened while he worked, learning things about these men he never knew before. So what brings you to our little town? Marcus finally asked. Thomas's face grew serious. Actually, I came looking for you, sir. Your old teammate James told me where to find you. I need some advice. What kind of advice? Marcus asked. Thomas looked down at his beer. I'm the only black SEAL in my unit. Most guys are fine, but there are a few who... He paused, struggling to find the right words. Who make you feel like you don't belong? Marcus finished for him. Thomas nodded. Yes, sir, nothing I can report, just small comments, ways they look at me. I was thinking of quitting. Frank, who was wiping glasses nearby, stopped to listen. Marcus was quiet for a moment. When I joined, the SEALs 20 years ago, there weren't many who looked like me. I faced the same problems, but I decided something important. I wouldn't let anyone else decide if I belonged. Only I could decide that. How did you handle it? Thomas asked. I worked twice as hard. I never complained, and I built trust with my teammates one day at a time. Eventually, they saw me as just another SEAL, not a black SEAL, just a SEAL. Frank spoke up. And look what happened when someone disrespected you. Your whole team showed up. Marcus nodded. That's the thing about the SEALs. Once you're part of the brotherhood, it doesn't matter what you look like. They'll have your back. But what if I never get to that point? Thomas asked. What if they never accept me? Some might not, Marcus admitted. But the ones who matter will. And those are the ones who will be standing next to you when things get tough. While they were talking, 3 big men walked into the bar. They were loud and had clearly been drinking somewhere else first. Frank watched them carefully. The tallest one pointed at Marcus and Thomas. Look at that, the tall man said too loudly. They're letting anyone in here these days. Frank stepped out from behind the bar. Gentlemen, everyone is welcome here as long as they show respect. If you can't do that, you need to leave. The men laughed. Since when do you care who comes in here, Frank? Asked the tall one. I've been drinking here for years. I remember when you had standards. Marcus turned slowly on his stool to face the men. He didn't say anything, just looked at them with calm, steady eyes. Thomas straightened his back, his Navy training showing. Things change, Dale, Frank said firmly. I learned some important lessons. Now you can stay and behave, or you can leave. Your choice. Dale looked at his friends, then back at Frank. This place isn't what it used to be, he said. Let's go somewhere else. As they turned to leave, Dale bumped into Thomas's shoulder hard. Thomas started to stand up, but Marcus put a hand on his arm. Not worth it, Marcus said quietly. Choose your battles carefully. After the men left, Frank came over with fresh beers. I'm sorry about that. You handled it well, Marcus said. Much better than you handled me that first night. He smiled. To show he was joking, Frank laughed. I'm still learning, but I'm trying. Thomas looked at Marcus with new respect. I see why your team showed up for you that night. You're the real deal. We all are, Marcus said. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Being a SEAL isn't about color. It's about character. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Later that night, after Thomas left, Frank sat down next to Marcus. The bar was nearly empty. Can I ask you something? Frank said. Why do you keep coming back here? After what I did, I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. Marcus thought about it. Because what happened that night wasn't just about me or you. or even my team. It was about showing that people can change. If I never came back, what would that teach? Frank nodded slowly. I want you to know that night changed me, made me think about how I've been living, the judgments I've been making. That's why I come back, Marcus said. Because every time someone sees me, sitting here, and sees you treating me with respect, it sends a message. People can learn. People can grow. You know, Frank said, that wall of veterans is the best thing that ever happened to this place. People come in just to look at it. I've heard stories I never knew before. Marcus smiled. Sometimes the best way to bring people together is to help them see what they have in common. As Marcus got ready to leave, he looked around the bar. What had started as one of the worst nights of his life had turned into something unexpected. Not just a lesson for Frank, but for the whole town. And now maybe for young Thomas too. Same time next week? Frank asked. Wouldn't miss it, Marcus replied. And Frank? Thanks for standing up to those guys tonight. Frank smiled. I learned from the best. As Marcus walked home under the stars, he thought about Thomas. The young SEAL had a hard road ahead, but Marcus would be there to help him, just like James and the team had been there for him. That's what the brotherhood was all about. Not just fighting together, but standing together. Always. 3 months after Thomas first came to the Rusty Anchor, the bar had become a regular meeting place for local veterans. Every Friday night, Marcus and Thomas would sit at the bar, talking about Navy life and helping each other through tough times. Frank had grown to like these nights the most. He learned more about the military from listening to their stories than he had in all his years before. One Friday evening, Frank noticed that Marcus seemed worried when he came in. He wasn't smiling like usual. Frank placed a beer in front of him without being asked. Everything okay? Frank asked. Marcus took a deep breath. Not really. Thomas was supposed to meet me here tonight. He's being sent on his first mission next week, but he just called. There's been some trouble at the base. What kind of trouble? Frank asked, leaning on the bar. Remember how Thomas said some guys in his unit gave him a hard time? Well, it got worse. Someone broke into his locker and messed with his gear. Marcus's face was serious. That's not just mean, it's dangerous. SEALs rely on their gear to stay alive. Frank shook his head. That's terrible. Is he reporting it? That's the problem, Marcus said. If he reports it, some might see him as weak or a snitch. If he doesn't, it might happen again, maybe at a time when it could get him killed. Just then, the door opened and Thomas walked in. He looked upset but was trying to hide it. He sat next to Marcus without saying a word. I ordered you a drink, Marcus said. Thanks. Thomas stared at the bar top. I decided not to report it. I'll just be extra careful checking my gear from now on. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. You know that's not the right call. What choice do I have? Thomas asked. I can't prove who did it. Frank put a soda in front of Thomas. Sometimes standing up for what's right means making hard choices. I learned that the hard way. He looked at Marcus. If I hadn't been called out for my behavior, I might never have changed. The three men talked for an hour about what Thomas should do. They didn't notice when 4 men in civilian clothes walked into the bar. One of them, a tall man with short hair, spotted Thomas and nudged his friends. They got drinks and took a table near the bar. Hey, Brown, the tall man called out. Surprised to see you here. Thought you'd be packing for the mission. Thomas turned. His face showed he knew these men. Chief Parker, I'm just having a quiet drink. With your special friend, I see, said another man looking at Marcus. You two always sticking together. Marcus studied the men carefully. By the way they carried themselves, he could tell they were SEALs. This must be part of Thomas's unit, probably the ones giving him trouble. You know, there's a tradition, Chief Parker said. First mission means the rookie buys a round for everyone. How about it, Brown? Before Thomas could answer, Marcus spoke up. Thomas, aren't you going to introduce me to your teammates? The men looked at Marcus with surprise. Thomas straightened up. This is Commander Marcus, sir. He served 15 years with SEAL Team 6. 3 bronze stars and 2 purple hearts. The men's attitudes changed slightly. Chief Parker nodded at Marcus. Sir, didn't realize you were Team 6. I was, Marcus said. Now I'm just enjoying retirement, but I still keep up with my old unit. In fact, they come visit sometimes. He looked directly at Parker. Team guys stick together always. Frank, watching from behind the bar, could feel the tension. He moved closer. Everything okay over here? Fine, Marcus said. Thomas's teammates were just leaving, I think. Parker looked like he wanted to say something else, but thought better of it. See you at base, Brown. Don't be late Monday. After they left, Thomas let out a long breath. Thanks. But you know that might make things worse. Maybe, Marcus said. Or maybe they'll think twice now that they know you're not alone. The next Friday, Thomas didn't show up at the bar. Marcus tried calling him, but there was no answer. He was getting worried when his phone rang. It was James, his old teammate. Marcus, have you seen the news? James asked. No, what's going on? There was an accident during training. A SEAL was injured. They're not releasing the name yet, but I thought you should know. Marcus's heart sank. Which unit? Thomas's unit. Marcus thanked James and hung up. He looked at Frank. I need to go. Thomas's unit had an accident. Someone's hurt. Frank nodded. Go. Let me know what happens. Marcus drove fast to the naval base. At the gate, he showed his veteran ID and asked about the accident. The guard wouldn't give him details but directed him to the base hospital. When Marcus got there, he found Thomas sitting in the waiting room. He had a bandage on his arm but looked okay otherwise. Thomas, are you all right? What happened? Marcus asked, relieved to see him. Thomas looked up. My oxygen tank failed during an underwater exercise. If my partner hadn't been right there with extra air, I could have drowned. Marcus sat down next to him. Was it an accident? Thomas was quiet for a moment. The tank was checked yesterday. It was fine then. Have you reported this? Thomas nodded. I had to. This wasn't just about me anymore. What if someone else got hurt next time? He looked at Marcus. The commander is investigating right now. They're checking all the gear and talking to everyone. Good, Marcus said. That's the right call. A week later, the Rusty Anchor was packed with people. Word had spread that something big had happened at the base. Marcus and Thomas sat at their usual spots at the bar. Frank brought them both drinks. So what happened? Frank asked. Everyone in town is talking, but nobody knows the real story. Thomas took a drink before answering. They found out who tampered with my gear. Chief Parker. He admitted it after. They found his fingerprints on the valve. Said he just wanted to scare me, not hurt me. That's still criminal, Marcus said. What's happening to him? He's being discharged, Thomas said. And the commander gave a speech to the whole unit about trust and looking out for each other. Said if we can't trust each other here, how can we trust each other in combat? Frank shook his head. I'm just glad you're okay. The best part, Thomas continued, is how the rest of the unit reacted. They were furious when they found out what Parker did. Now they're bending over backward to make me feel welcome. He smiled. One of them even said, You're not a black seal, you're just a seal. And a damn good one. Marcus smiled. Sounds familiar. I never would have reported it without your advice, Thomas said. Both of you. He looked at Frank too. Sometimes standing up for what's right is the hardest thing to do. But it's the only way things change. Frank refilled their glasses. To standing up for what's right, he said, raising his own glass. And to the brotherhood, Marcus added, the real one, where everyone belongs. As they drank, Thomas's phone buzzed. He looked at it and smiled. Some of my unit are coming by tonight. They want to meet you, Marcus, and they want to see this famous wall of honor. Marcus looked at Frank, who was smiling wide. Look at that, Marcus said. From kicking me out to hosting SEAL team parties. Things really do change. For the better, Frank said. Definitely for the better. Later that night, when Thomas's teammates arrived, there were no problems, no tension, just stories, laughter, and respect. The wall of honor had a new picture. Now, Thomas in his uniform. And below it, in Frank's handwriting, were the words, "Everyone belongs." 1 year had passed since Marcus first walked into the Rusty Anchor. The bar had changed a lot in that time. The wall of honor now covered an entire wall, filled with pictures of local veterans. People from all over town came to see it and add photos of their family members who had served. Frank stood behind the bar watching the Friday night crowd. The place was packed as usual. In the corner, Marcus sat with Thomas and some other SEALs. Thomas had just returned from his second mission. He looked more confident now, more at ease with his team. Frank's phone rang. It was his daughter, Lisa. She had moved away years ago and rarely called. "Dad, I need your help," she said, her voice shaking. "My car broke down and I'm stranded. I'm about 2 hours from you." "Lisa? Are you okay?" Frank asked, worried. "Where exactly are you?" "I'm at a gas station off Highway 16. It's the middle of nowhere. The mechanic says it'll take days to get the parts and I can't afford a hotel for that long." "I'll come get you," Frank said without hesitation. "Just stay put." Frank hung up and looked around the crowded bar. It was his busiest night and his assistant manager was out sick. He couldn't just leave, but his daughter needed him. Marcus noticed Frank's worried face and walked over. "Everything okay?" Frank explained the situation. "I need to go get her, but I can't close the bar on a Friday night. People depend on this place." Marcus thought for a moment. "I could watch the bar for you." Frank looked surprised. "You know how to run a bar?" "No," Marcus admitted with a smile. "But I led men into combat. I think I can handle serving drinks for one night." Frank hesitated. "I don't know." "Look," Marcus said, "you helped me when I needed it. Let me return the favor. Plus, Thomas and the guys can help too." Frank looked at the crowded bar, then back at his phone. "Okay, let me show you the basics before I go." 20 minutes later, Frank was on the road, and Marcus was behind the bar. Thomas and 2 other SEALs stood nearby, ready to help. "Okay, team," Marcus said with a serious face that made Thomas laugh. "Our mission tonight is to keep this bar running until Frank gets back. Thomas, you handle drinks on the left side. Johnson, you take the right. Williams, you collect glasses and keep tables clean. I'll handle the cash register and main bar." The SEALs looked at each other, amused by Marcus using his commander voice for bar duty. But they followed his orders like the trained soldiers they were. At first, things went smoothly. Marcus was a quick learner and remembered how Frank mixed the basic drinks. The other SEALs worked efficiently, moving through the crowded bar with ease. Customers were surprised to see new faces behind the bar but enjoyed the novelty. "Where's Frank?" one regular customer asked. "Family emergency," Marcus explained. "He'll be back later tonight." The man looked at Marcus and the other SEALs working together. "Well, I'll be." Frank left his bar in the hands of the very man he once kicked out. Times really have changed. Marcus smiled. "More than you know." As the night went on, the bar got busier. A group of loud young men came in and demanded complicated drinks that Marcus didn't know how to make. They got angry when he suggested simpler options. "What kind of bartender doesn't know how to make a Manhattan?" one of them said rudely. "The kind who usually sits on the other side of the bar," Marcus replied calmly. "We're filling in for Frank. Tonight?" "Well, you're doing a terrible job," the man said, raising his voice. "No wonder Frank doesn't usually let your kind run things." The bar got quiet. Thomas and the other SEALs moved closer to Marcus. Marcus looked at the man steadily. "What exactly do you mean by your kind?" The man realized what he had said and looked around nervously. The whole bar was watching now. He saw the SEAL tattoo on Thomas's arm and the hard looks on the faces of all 4 men behind the bar. I just meant amateurs," he stammered. "People who aren't professional bartenders." "That's not what you meant," Thomas said, stepping forward. "But we'll give you a chance to walk out of here with some dignity. That's more than you deserve." The young man and his friends quickly left. As the door closed behind them, the bar erupted in applause. An old veteran raised his glass to Marcus. Well handled, Commander. By midnight, things had calmed down. Most customers had left, and only a few regulars remained. Marcus and the SEALs were cleaning up when the door opened. Frank walked in with a young woman who looked tired but relieved. "Dad," she said when she saw the SEALs behind the bar. "What's going on?" Frank smiled. "Lisa, these are my friends. They've been watching the bar for me." He introduced everyone, saving Marcus for last. "And this is Marcus, the man who changed everything." Lisa shook Marcus's hand. "My dad has told me so much about you in his letters, about how you and your SEAL team taught him an important lesson." "It goes both ways," Marcus said. "Your dad taught me something too, that people can change when given the chance." Frank looked around the bar. "Everything go okay while I was gone?" Thomas laughed. "Commander Marcus ran a tight ship. We had one small incident, but we handled—" "Dorsey, what incident?" Frank asked. Marcus waved it off. "Nothing important. Some young guys with bad attitudes. We showed them the door." Lisa looked confused. "I don't understand. Why would my dad's bar need Navy SEALs to run it, and what lesson are you talking about?" Frank looked uncomfortable. "It's a long story, honey. Not one of my proudest moments. But it had a good ending," Marcus added. "That's what matters." The next morning, Frank and Lisa came early to clean up the bar. Marcus had done a good job, but there were still glasses to wash and tables to wipe down. "So," Lisa said as they worked, "are you going to tell me the real story of how you became friends with a group of Navy SEALs?" Frank sighed. "It started a year ago. I made a terrible mistake. I judged a man by the color of his skin instead of who he really was." He told her everything, how he had kicked Marcus out, how the SEAL team had shown up the next day, and how that night had changed his life. Lisa listened without interrupting. When Frank finished, she had tears in her eyes. "Dad, I had no idea. You've changed so much." "We all have," Frank said, looking at the Wall of Honor. "This bar used to be just a place to drink. Now it's something more. It's a place where everyone belongs." Later that day, Marcus stopped by to check on things. Lisa was behind the bar with her father, learning the business. "Dad's been telling me about everything that happened," she said to Marcus. "I wanted to thank you for giving him a second chance. Not everyone would do that." "The world has enough anger in it," Marcus said. "Sometimes what people need most is a chance to make things right." Frank put his arm around his daughter. "Lisa's decided to stay and help run the bar. Says she wants to be part of what we've built here." "What you've built is special," Marcus said, looking around at the photos on the wall, at the diverse crowd of customers, at the sense of community that filled the place. "From one mistake came all of this." "From one mistake came a friendship," Frank corrected him. "Everything else grew from there." As Marcus sat at his usual spot, he thought about how a single moment had changed so many lives. His own, Frank's, Thomas's, and now Lisa's too. The team that had shown up to stand with him that night had done more than just support one man. They had started something that kept growing, touching more lives with each passing day. "To friendship," Frank said, placing a drink in front of Marcus. "To friendship," Marcus agreed, "and to second chances." Around them, the rusty anchor hummed with life, a living reminder that sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best changes, if people are brave enough to stand together and wise enough to forgive. 2 years had passed since that first night when Marcus walked into the rusty anchor. The small bar had become famous in the region. People came from neighboring towns just to see the Wall of Honor and hear the story of the Navy SEALs who taught a bar owner an unforgettable lesson. Frank and his daughter Lisa now ran the bar together. Lisa had brought new ideas, including a monthly Veterans Night, where military members ate and drank for free. These nights were always packed, with veterans from different wars sharing stories and finding friendship. One Tuesday morning, Frank was reading the newspaper when he saw something that made him stop. There was an article about budget cuts affecting veteran services in their area. The local Veteran Support Center was going to close down. This center helped hundreds of former soldiers with jobs, housing, and medical care. Frank immediately called Marcus. Have you seen today's paper? Not yet, Marcus replied. What's going on? They're closing the Veteran Center, the one that helped Thomas find housing when he left active duty, the one that's been helping so many of our friends. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's bad news. A lot of people depend on that place. We need to do something, Frank said. I'm thinking of organizing a fundraiser at the bar, but I'll need your help. Count me in, Marcus said without hesitation. And I know others who will help too. That evening, Frank, Lisa, Marcus, and Thomas sat at a table in the empty bar, making plans. Lisa had created a budget on her laptop. We need to raise at least $50,000 to keep the center open for another year, she explained. That's a lot of money for a small-town bar to raise. Then we'll need to think bigger, Marcus said. This isn't just about our town. Veterans from all over the county use that center. Thomas nodded. I can reach out to my SEAL contacts, maybe get some Special Forces guys to come. People would pay to meet real SEALs. And I can contact local businesses for donations, Frank added. Many of them have benefited from our veterans. Lisa typed everything into her computer. If we do this right, it could work. But we'll need help from everyone. Marcus smiled. Well, that's what we do best, isn't it? Bringing people together. For the next 3 weeks, they worked day and night. Frank contacted every business owner he knew. Lisa created posters and used social media to spread the word. Marcus reached out to his military connections, and Thomas got his SEAL team involved. Their plan was to host a huge event called Stand Together for Veterans. It would include a barbecue, live music, an auction of items donated by local businesses, and special appearances by military heroes from around the country. As the day of the event got closer, things started to go wrong. First, the band they had booked canceled at the last minute. Then, heavy rain was predicted for the weekend of the event. And finally, the company providing the large tent for the outdoor activities doubled their price unexpectedly. We can't afford this, Lisa said during an emergency meeting. We're already spending too much of our budget before the event even starts. Frank looked worried. Maybe we should postpone. We can't, Marcus said firmly. The center closes in 6 weeks. We don't have time to reschedule. They all sat in silence, trying to think of solutions. Then the bar door opened and a man in a business suit walked in. He was tall, with gray hair and a serious face. Are you Frank? The man asked. Frank stood up. Yes, that's me. I'm David Wilson. I own Wilson Construction. He looked around at the group. I heard you're having some trouble with your veterans fundraiser. Thomas stood up too. How did you know about that? David smiled slightly. This is a small town. Word gets around. He turned back to Frank. I want to help. My company can provide the tent and setup for free, and I know the owner of Soundwave Music. They can replace your band. Frank was surprised. That's very generous, but why would you do this for us? I don't think we've ever met before. David was quiet for a moment. Then he rolled up his sleeve to reveal a Marine Corps tattoo. I served 2 tours in Iraq. When I came home, I was lost. The Veteran Center helped me get my life together, get treatment for PTSD, and start my business. He looked at each of them. I wouldn't be where I am today without that place, and I'm not the only one. Marcus stepped forward and shook David's hand. Thank you. This means a lot. Don't thank me yet, David said. I'm just the first. There are more people who want to help. You just need to let them know how. The day of the fundraiser arrived. Despite the rain forecast, the sky was clear and blue. The large tent provided by David's company stood in the field behind the rusty anchor. Food trucks lined one side, and a stage had been set up for the band. Tables displayed items for the auction, including sports memorabilia, vacation packages, and handmade goods. By noon, hundreds of people had arrived. Many wore military uniforms or veteran caps. Thomas and 6 members of his SEAL team were taking photos with excited children and signing autographs. Marcus stood with Frank, watching it all with amazement. I never thought it would be this big, Frank said. People care, Marcus replied. They just need a chance to show it. Throughout the day, more people arrived. A local TV station sent a news crew. The mayor gave a speech about the importance of supporting veterans, and David Wilson announced that his company would match every dollar raised up to $50,000. When Lisa counted the money that evening, she could hardly believe total. We raised over $75,000. With David's match, that's $125,000. The group cheered. It was enough to keep the Veteran Center open for 2 years, with extra money for new programs. As the last guests left, Marcus, Frank, Lisa, Thomas, and David sat at a table, tired but happy. "You know what this reminds me of?" Marcus said. "That night when my whole team showed up here. People standing together to make a point." Frank nodded. "Except this time, it was the whole town standing together." "It started with you two," Lisa said, looking at Marcus and her father. "If you hadn't found a way past your differences, none of this would have happened." David looked curious. "What's this story? I've heard people talk about it, but I don't know the details." Frank looked embarrassed, but Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "It's a story about making mistakes and making things right, about how sometimes the worst moments can lead to the best changes." 1 month later, the Veterans Center held a special ceremony. They were naming their new job training program after the Rusty Anchor Bar. Frank, Marcus, Thomas, and Lisa stood together as the ribbon was cut. The center director gave a speech. "This program exists because a community came together, and that community came together because of the example set by these individuals." He gestured to Frank and Marcus. "They showed us that it's never too late to learn from our mistakes, that forgiveness is powerful, and that standing together can change everything." After the ceremony, a young veteran approached Marcus. "Sir, I heard what you and your SEAL team did at that bar 2 years ago, standing up against discrimination. That story inspired me when I was overseas." He looked at Frank. "And I heard how you changed, sir, how you made things right. That's just as inspiring." Frank and Marcus looked at each other, remembering how far they had come from that first night. "The best part of this whole story," Marcus said, "is that it's still being written. Every time someone hears it and changes how they treat others, the story grows. And every time people stand together to help each other," Frank added, "it grows even more." As they walked back to the bar, they passed many people whose lives had been touched by their story. Veterans who found support, community, members who learned to see past differences, and young people who were inspired to stand up for what was right. What had started as one painful moment of discrimination had grown into something beautiful, a movement of understanding, respect, and unity that was changing their entire community, one person at a time. And it all began because a Navy SEAL decided to come back to a bar where he wasn't wanted, and a bar owner decided to listen and learn instead of staying the same.